Actually, I wasn't looking for a tri-pacer at all. I'm a previous aircraft owner. I had an air coupe, a couple of Moonies. The airplane was on the other side of the country. It was in Hood River, Oregon, and there were mountains and evergreens and snow as far as the eye could see. I was thinking, what have I gotten myself into?
AOPA keeps flying safe, accessible, and fun by protecting your freedom to fly. We are the most trusted one-stop resource for all things related to general aviation. Become an AOPA pilot today.
Well, we have a vintage museum restored 1953 Piper Tri-Pacer, also known as the milk stool, but this one looks a little bit better because it's got wheel pants on it. We were on an assignment at Hood River, Oregon at the Wham Museum, and walking around, it's a fascinating place. They have 130 some odd aircraft that fly every couple of weeks. They take 4 or 5 out. And we went into the restoration hangar. And the restoration hangar had 4 or 5 airplanes in it in various stages of restoration. And in the corner was this little baby. And it had, on the propeller, it had like a garage sale type for sale sign.
Whole group of airplanes you see behind us, the 206, the Tri-Pacer, the Panther, the Beaver, they're all airplanes that have been donated for the purpose of putting some dollars into our next building.
Yeah, it's a good story. Actually, I wasn't looking for a Tri-Pacer at all. I'm a previous aircraft owner. I had an air coupe, a couple of Moonies, and was partners in a 172 retractable. And Julie, you said, hey, that little airplane in the corner is crying out for you. It's got your name written on it. And I was like, I don't know about that.
An airplane that was donated to our museum from another museum that was going out of business. They restored it up in Concrete, Washington, and they restored it basically to new airplane standards. When you look at it, I mean, everything about this thing is brand new. And hopefully somebody will just love to have it and fly it away. It's, we've been flying it on a regular basis. A couple of our younger people in the organization have been using it for some cross-country flying for their private license. So it's ready to go flying airplanes, so it's probably one you need to have.
What appealed to me was the fact that it was virtually brand new. It looks like it was a time machine, you know, like a Back to the Future thing. So that was intriguing to me. You and Julie, you encouraged me a little bit to consider this airplane, and when we were leaving to go on to the next part of the assignment, Chris leaned over in the car and said, Dave T, if you don't buy that airplane, I will, and I'm not a pilot. So that got me really, you know, spurred up, and it got me going. It got the wheels turning to try to figure out how I can make it happen. Then I was thinking, well, I don't have any mountain flying experience, and I sure hadn't flown across the country before, and I don't know this airplane at all. So those were like, you know, strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, but it was a challenge. Thinking about flying across the country by yourself, if you haven't done it before, it is a significant challenge. I did not know how big of a hurdle that was before I started out on it. I felt like I had a good route. I had some great backups. I had some people coaching me. The important part was to get the mountain flying experience in Oregon with an instructor and get familiar with this airplane also. Did I have a moment where I thought, oh no, what have I gotten into? Yes, absolutely yes. The first time that occurred was shortly after I took off from Hood River, Oregon, because the terrain there steadily climbs to about 9,000 feet. There's snow and evergreens all around me, and I'm figuring, what have I got myself into? As far as any direction I see, there's craggy rocks, snow, and trees, and no population. And sure enough, there's this big old snow-covered mountain in front of me. And then I was getting, you know, the ground was coming up higher and higher and closer to the airplane. I was getting flight following, and right then is when air traffic control got on my frequency and said, 3328 Alpha, do you realize the minimum en route altitude in that area in the direction of your flight is 14,000 feet? What is your altitude? I said, 11,500. And they said, what are your plans? And I said, well, my plans are to pick left or pick right of this mountain, but I'm not going into it. I start off across Nebraska, planned a fuel stop, I forgot what airport, but the right tank went dry right over another airport. So I said, okay, this is a sign from above, land here and get fuel. I tell them what I'm doing and I'm getting ready to land, and I hear some garbled transmission, couldn't really make it out. So I land at this airport. This guy, Gene, comes out from the airport. And I say, hey, you know, how's it going? He goes, not great. He goes, did you hear me on the radio? I said, nope. I heard some static on the radio. He goes, I hope you don't need fuel. And I said, I do need fuel. So he said, well, our fuel truck quit working. It stalled out behind some hangars. Can you taxi between the hangars and maybe we can get it going? I'll give it a whirl. So taxi between the hangars. I help him with the ladder. I go ahead and get the hose out. I'm doing all the stuff. Got fueled up. And he goes, I'm going to try to start this truck up. Now, it hadn't been started in 2 weeks. So he gets in there and he turns the key, and it was a miracle. The thing starts up. Now I'm headed, towards closer to the Mississippi River, and now the weather starts moving in. The weather that I was trying to stay behind, I'd actually got in front of a little bit. And so there were snow showers all along the route. I went ahead and decided to climb up above the clouds. Now, all of a sudden, I'm thinking, well, I'm looking at my watch. When does the sun set? And the sun sets like at 7:15, and it's like 7 o'clock. So I see an opening in the clouds, and so I dart down through this opening, and I got underneath the clouds, and now I could actually see the snow. It was really snowing. It really, truly was snowing on both sides of me. And I make it to this airport in Missouri. The next morning, my goal that day was to get to Ohio. I'm in the pattern to land, and I'd set up a nice landing. It was a Sunday afternoon. I landed, and then I landed near the center line, and the next thing I know, I'm swerving off the left side of the runway. And I'm thinking, oh my God, what is going on?
Tower 28 Alpha appears to have a flat left tire.
And the tower told me that they had already called the maintenance personnel at that airport, and they were well aware of my situation. And well, the next morning, we had 3 people working on the tri-pacer. We looked at what was going on. It turns out that the tube that was in the tire was malformed from the factory. So fortunately, I had a tube with me. They had a spare tire, and so before you know it, I was back on my way again on the last leg of my journey. I'm like pretty psyched now. I'd only really been delayed 1 day because of the flat tire, the overnight. I stopped for lunch at our Ohio bureau. And a couple of guys go out and look at the tri-pacer. And this is not unusual. People look at the tri-pacer all the time. It's a cool looking airplane. It's old, it's vintage. And this one guy, Al, looks at it, walks around. He goes, son, have you flown at night yet? I said, yeah, I flew a little bit at night, Al. I hate to tell you, it was snowing. I was in Missouri. I was like, I need to get on the ground. And he goes, well, son, next time you fly at night, you gotta choose. You gotta choose. Like, choose what, Al? He said, it's the landing lights or the radio, but not both at the same time. And I said, okay, Al. And so now I'm coming into Frederick, Maryland. I cross the Maryland border, and I land and reduce the power, and all of a sudden, quiet. Like, no lights, no power, no radio, no nothing. And the first thing I was thinking was, old Al was right. You got to choose between the landing light and the radio, but not both. So then I had an emergency master switch. You push it down in one way, and it goes straight to the battery. I did that and taxied in here, and I had a nice welcoming party that met me. And I got out of the airplane and was so happy to be here. I told them they needed to wait a second, and I actually kissed the ground. I've come to be fascinated with it and enjoy it. It's a little quirky, but it has some deeper meaning. I think that having my friends behind me as collaborators was another significant thing that I took away from this, and I would like to keep that connection.